Finding the optimal rep range for you can be hard, and most people don't even know what to look for in order to determine what their optimal rep range would be for them. And so that's why in this video we are going to go through exactly how you can easily determine what is your optimal rep range, or should I say, your optimal time under load. See, when we are talking about rep ranges, we always have to specify the rep cadence, because what matters isn't how many times the weight goes up and down, but how long the muscle is under significant tension or being significantly challenged, the time under load. Now, why do we care about the time under load, but not the number of reps that you perform? Before I get into that, I just want to introduce myself real quickly. My name is Alphonse. Here we talk about how to maximize results from your training with as little risk of injury and with as little time spent in the gym as possible. As you can see, I'm far from the biggest guy giving fitness advice on YouTube, but I'm an absolute super mega nerd when it comes to exercise, and I've been obsessed with learning as much as I possibly can about it ever since I was 14. And so if you're hopefully humble enough to take advice from someone like me who isn't absolutely huge, then I could definitely teach you some stuff and help you to avoid having to spin your wheels, making little to no progress like I first did when I first started training and knew nothing about this stuff. But anyways, like I said, why do we care about the time under load but not the number of reps that you perform? So let me put it this way. How do we stimulate our muscles to grow and get stronger? By challenging their ability to perform their function. What is our muscle's function? Not to produce movement, but to produce force. How do we challenge that function? By contracting our muscles against resistance. And we want to be contracting our muscles against that resistance for an adequate time in order to, number one, recruit all of the available muscle fibers in the targeted muscle. Number two, deeply fatigue them, which is going to be necessary for recruitment and also stimulation. But we also want to do this so we don't have to use a very high level of force when we are exercising, because we want to be conservative with the forces that we produce and the forces that we encounter when we are exercising in order to minimize our risk of injury. Because when the forces get too high, when the forces get so high that your various tissues, your tendons and your muscles can't handle it and their structural integrity gets compromised, well, that's when injury happens. Now, the time under load for a set that seems to work best for most people is about a 60 to 90 second time under load. And to achieve our desired time under load, we want our rep cadence together with our rep range to land us within that desired time under load. For example, if you're using a 4-4 cadence, which is, 4 seconds up and 4 seconds down, and by the way, that's the fastest cadence that I would recommend anybody use. If you're using that cadence and you're including maybe a 2 to 3 second hold in the fully contracted position on most exercises where you can do that, then each repetition is going to take about 10 seconds to complete. And if you want to have a 60 to 90 second time under load, then about a 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 rep range would be what we want if we are using that particular cadence. But if you're using a 15 second up and 15 second down cadence, which by the way is the slowest possible cadence that I would recommend anyone use, and if you want to know why I'm recommending 4-4 as the fastest and 15-15 as the slowest, then you can ask me in the comments. If you're using that cadence, well, in that case, each repetition is going to take about 30 or a couple of more seconds in order to complete. And so in that case, about a 2 to 3 rep range is what you're going to want in order to land within that 60 to 90 second time under load. But of course, anywhere between 4-4 and 15-15 is absolutely fine to use also. But now let's get into the real interesting stuff, which is that even though I said that most people do best with about a 60 to 90 second time under load, there are still going to be people who do better with either a little bit higher or a little bit lower time under load. And by the way, it doesn't have to be for everything. It could just be that you do better with a bit lower time under load for maybe just your upper body, or maybe it's just your lower body. Or maybe you do better with a higher time under load for your lower body and a lower time under load for your upper body than 60 to 90 seconds. Again, it's all going to depend on the individual. Now, exactly how do you determine if you are someone who can benefit from a little bit higher or a little bit lower time under load? Someone someone who does well with a 60 to 90 second time on a load is going to land somewhere within their target rep range or their target time on a load when you increase the weight after they have reached the upper limit of their target time on a load or their target rep range. So let's say, for example, you're using a 4-4 cadence and you're using a 6 to 10 repetition range, and when you get to 10 repetitions, you increase the weight a little bit and you drop down somewhere in between, 10 and 6 repetitions again. But someone who would do better with a little bit higher time on the load than 60 to 90 seconds is usually going to have trouble with weight increases unless you wait until they are able to do more time than 90 seconds. So for example, let's say that you're using a 60 to 90 second time on a load, right? And you're using maybe a 4-4 cadence, or you're using a 6 to 10 repetition range, and you get to 10 reps and you just increase the weight a little bit, but even though you just increase the weight a little bit, you start to still drop quite far below your lower limit of your target rep range. So maybe you just increase the weight a little bit when you get to 10 reps, but then you drop all the way down to 5 or 4, and you keep doing that consistently when you increase your weight. In that case, you might be someone who could benefit from a little bit higher time under load. For example, something like 80 to 120 seconds instead of 60 to 90 seconds. And by the way, you don't want to be going over 2 minutes of time on the load, because if you do that, you kind of start moving into, steady state activity territory. Now, on the other hand, someone who would do better with a little bit lower time on the load than 60 to 90 seconds is usually going to have trouble to get past a certain amount of time on a load pretty much no matter what they do. Maybe they just can't seem to get past about, let's say for example, 7 reps on a particular cadence. But if when they get to 7 reps, they increase the weight just a little bit and they're still able to perform within a good range of that, well, in that case, you would probably be someone who might benefit from a little bit lower time on the load. Maybe in that case, you would do, for example, 45 to 75 seconds of time on a load instead of 60 to 90. And by the way, I want to mention this as just a general guideline. Whatever you determine your upper target rep range or time on a load to be, your lower target rep range is generally going to be about 30 to 40% lower than that. This is why you see rep ranges like 6 to 10, 8 to 12, 3 to 5 and stuff like this, because that's about 30 to 40% lower than that upper limit. But anyways, before I end the video, I must say something first. When you perform these sets with an adequate time on a load and you do them properly to momentary muscular failure, then in that case, doing more than one of these sets is going to be completely unnecessary and it's not going to give you any better results. And in a lot of cases, performing more than one of these properly performed sets per exercise is going to be too much exercise for a lot of people, because one of these sets, again, performed properly to momentary muscular failure and with an adequate time on a load, is going to be a lot more demanding than most people's relatively short, sloppy, low intensity sets. And if you're thinking, what is this guy even saying right now, then I would like to refer you to this video where I go a lot more in depth about why you actually only need to perform one of these properly performed sets per exercise if you actually perform them properly. And if you're wondering, how do I perform a set properly then? Well, then I would like to refer you to this video where I go, a lot more in depth about that and talk about the things you want to be thinking about and the things that you want to be avoiding in order to perform your sets properly. But that's all for this video. I really hope you guys liked it and I really hope you guys found it useful. And if you felt like you learned at least something from this video, then please don't forget to leave at least a like on this video. It really supports the channel and I highly appreciate it. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future from me, then don't forget to click that subscribe and ring that notification bell so you can be notified the next time I upload a video. But with that being said, like always, I see you boys in the next video next time. Peace.